We move to our first segment this morning, conversation that deals with what's happening on the trade front, what's happening in the larger geoeconomics sphere, and its implications, but also the opportunities that we could avail in these times of transition. A stellar star cast this morning. We have Prime Minister Tony Abbott, the former Prime Minister of Australia. We, of course, have Chairman of JBIC, Maeda-san, Chairperson of Keizai, Doyukai, and Chairperson of Suntory Holdings, Niinami-san. We have Shruti Pandalai, a fellow at the Institute for Defense Studies and Analyses. Ken Weinstein, the Japan chair at the Hudson Institute. We have Jung-Yeop, Senior Vice President, Hyundai Motor Corp. Gautam Saxena, Managing Director for Asia-Pacific, the ING Bank. And they are going to be bringing their specific perspectives, but also their expertise to dwell on both the opportunities and the disruptions that we are grappling with at this particular moment. So let me first turn it over to Tony Abbott, Prime Minister. You have 4 to 5 minutes, and then I'll come back to you for a second round.
Well, thank you, Samir. It's wonderful to be here. And if I may, I'm going to direct these remarks not just to the Japan-India relationship, but really to all the great democracies, the United States, the democracies of the Indo-Pacific and of Europe. And I think the basic question that all of us are now facing is, what sort of a world do we want to live in, and what sort of lives do we want to lead? You see, the world in 2020, pre-pandemic, pre-Ukraine, pre-October 7, pre-Cold War II, and pre-Trump 2.0 was more free, more fair, more safe, more rich for more people than any time in human history. That world was the result of globalisation under the Pax Americana. But that world, I have to say, is slipping away. Globalisation is going because America has realised that freer trade has empowered its great strategic rival. The question is, has the Pax Americana gone too? Now, the Pax Americana was built on a sense of America's fundamental benevolence. Look at the reconstruction of Western Europe, of Japan, and then South Korea and perhaps even Taiwan, all a product of American benevolence. Even the Iraq War, however misguided it might have been, was at least designed to try to spread democracy. Now, under President Trump, American policy is different. Quite often, America first looks suspiciously like America only. And sometimes, under the current administration, it's difficult to know whose side America is on. There appears to be a fascination with President Putin. There appears to be a desire for a deal with Iran. Perhaps there may be an interest in a deal with President Xi. Then, of course, we have the tariff wars. Now, I've got to say that there is some sense in a substantial economic decoupling from China under the CCP. So I think there is something to be said for substantial tariffs against China. But it is hard to see the logic, either economic or geopolitical, in trade wars between the United States, Canada and Mexico. Right now, it feels like there is a world turned upside down, which some of you might remember was the tune the British Army Band played after the defeat at Yorktown. And yet, ask yourself this question. If you couldn't live in your current land, if you had to go somewhere else, where would you choose to live? Would you choose to live in the United States, or would you choose to live in China? And that's why this question of who ultimately is to provide global leadership, what kind of a world we want to live in, is so important. I think American global leadership is worth keeping, and I think the Pax Americana is worth striving for.
A very strong case for America to come back. I'm not sure, Prime Minister Abbott, Americans are listening. So we might have to find alternative arrangements, and let's talk about that as well in this particular conversation. Maeda-san, can I turn to you now?
Thank you, Samir. Many years ago, in the early 1990s, I was in the front of a trade conflict between the United States and Japan. At the first Clinton administration, I was young government officials of the Ministry of Finance, also that representative in Washington, D.C. I watched what's going on. But I think that that time's conflict is a bilateral issue between U.S. and Japan. Now it has been changed to U.S. versus entire world. So it's a big change, so that we need to prepare how we can survive and how we can cement that the partnership among the like-minded countries, including United States of America. That's very important. On 14th of April, I paid a visit to Kuala Lumpur, and I had a meeting with the Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, and we discussed how Japan and Malaysia, not just only Malaysia, but the entire Southeast Asia, ASEAN countries, to get closer. In particular, that connectivity of infrastructure on a power cable and optical fiber cable. That is very important. So that I don't know that to what extent that the U.S. administration and the top leaders is aware of that. After my visit, one day after, President Xi Jinping paid a visit to Kuala Lumpur. He made a trip to Vietnam and Cambodia and Malaysia. Why? Because the U.S. is now focusing on circumventing export from China to those countries to the United States. That will increase that trade deficit of the United States. So as I said earlier, that this is not just only bilateral issue, this is a U.S. versus entire world. Japan, by the way, for 5 consecutive years, Japan has been the largest foreign direct investor to the United States of America. Total balance of foreign direct investment from Japan to the United States is $800 billion US. For trade flow, we are number one, and also that compared with others like Germany or Canada, the difference is that our investment is mainly in the manufacturers, including automobile industry. I had a very quick meeting with Howard Lutnick of Secretary of Commerce at Mar-a-Lago, not Washington, D.C., Mar-a-Lago and Palm Beach. And he asked me, by the way, how many automobiles produced in Toyota Motors in U.S. factory exporting to Japan? That question is very important. There's some implication because most of the automobile, like Toyota is now a manufacturer, invested in the United States in the factory and manufactured the automobile for the U.S. market. For example, that the Toyota Camry is exclusive model for the U.S. market. There's no export to Japan, so that we have not seen that any Camry in Tokyo, in Japan. Used to be, but not anymore. So that if Japan total export back to those commonly to Japan, that it will contribute to reduce the trade deficit of the United States. And the same thing that if those cars going to Southeast Asia, it reduce its trade deficit in the United States to Southeast Asia. So we can coordinate together with other potential like-minded countries, because now Southeast Asia is swaying player between the West and China. And Malaysia, for example, that Malaysia and Australia has good kind of joint ventures of critical minerals, rare earth elements of liners. It's a big, strong model to replace China, some part of supply chain of critical minerals. And this liners company is already announced to invest in Texas, United States. But what I heard from the Australia is that there are many disinformation spread in the state of Texas about this liners for indirect investment in Texas. Possibly it be conducted by Chinese. It's a totally disinformation, totally not true, saying that this factory would make a significant negative impact on the environment of Texas. China does not care any negative impact of the environment, but they use this factor to avoid any foreign direct investment deployment from liners to Texas. We have to take a look at this happen. So that there are a lot of opportunity for us to coordinate. And also I had a meeting with a US offshore in Kuala Lumpur. He said, there's good chance for Malaysia, for example, that Malaysia can make significant reform by blaming on the US. We call this gaiatsu in Japan, many traditional gaiatsu. So I was very impressed by what he said, that so that we can make the best use of gaiatsu in my own way to make reform and to better track. And then eventually it will contribute to reduce the trade conflict with the United States, because most of certainty made by President Trump is that we can make some projection, predict what he is going to do, but we are not so sure that what is eventually the goal of his agenda. So employment, or bring back the manufacturers in the United States. But now the problem of the United States is the lack of a workforce and inflation. So these two issues are very, very sensitive issue. But Mr. Trump administration will deport immigrant to probably to Mexico and others, Northern Triangle countries. We know that's a problem in the United States because of this traffic of illegal immigration, and also that the traffic of narcotic traffic from his. So I had some experience working together with Trump administration's people in Trump 1.0. Especially, I have worked together with Jared Kushner. So he was smart enough to understand it. So he's not anymore in the administration, but we can do something for positive things with Trump 2.0 if we are smart enough. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a wonderful intervention. I take away two important points. One, can we reorganize the way we are manufacturing and exporting? And I think the whole global value chain concept comes back into play. But also, I think maybe his unique style has forced and will compel many of us to reform at home and to make ourselves more resilient, more competitive, and far more diverse in our economic spread. In that sense, I think this is also a time to look inwards. Let me now turn to Niinami-san for your intervention this morning.
Thank you, Samir. I'd like to talk about 3 points. One is current economic situation, mainly about Japan. The second is then what to do with the current situation. We are facing this situation. The third is geopolitics, geoeconomics, geotechnology, based on Quad. First of all, Japan just woke up from a 30-year sleep of deflation. And now is the time to go into the investment. And we've got a huge punch from trade policy of the Trump administration. We are wondering what to do. And if the current tariffs will be applied to our business, especially export from Japan to the US, that affects perhaps 1% against the GDP, which is enormous. But more than that, I think consumer confidence has been waning a lot. Despite the fact that we business started to increase wages, and this year is the third year to increase in a row, more than 5%. It's a tremendous change, and it created a new landscape of our economy of Japan. So we are now ready to take action. But come on, Mr. Trump, do not intervene our readiness. But we've been decreasing productivity because we wonder what to do. Definitely, we know some end game will happen, but we don't know about that. So uncertainty is reducing productivity. Uncertainty is a huge issue for us to make a decision. For example, M&A, lots of capital infusion from other countries and among ourselves in this country. I think it's been kind of more or less stagnant because of uncertainty created by the United States. That's what's happening. And look at the United States. We have a huge stake in the United States. We invested around $17 billion as Suntory. And the consumer confidence is waning a lot. And some people say recession is already happening. It might be right. So the question is, realities are winning? Realities will win in the United States. If so, we can bet perhaps we can invest in the US, we can invest to the acquisitions and in Japan. We are more or less semi-paralyzed to make a decision and take action. But the realities are winning, true, right? Bond market, stock market. Because of that, Secretary Bessent talked to the president. We have to be careful. And that's why they shook hands with China to some extent. It's really surprising. But that's paralyzing, semi-paralyzing economy. That's the world situation. That's why I said this situation. Second, then what to do? I think the Trump tariff policy is created by MAGA. And MAGA phenomena will continue in the United States, despite the fact that who is benefiting? Big techs of the US, right? And they now realize, oh my gosh, Trump policy is not good for them, for us, I mean. But MAGA will continue because that's anxiety, mistrust. And it's because of lack of redistribution of wealth. But look at the wealthy people of big techs. They got the repercussions from especially EU, perhaps some other countries, because they need globalization, they need free trade. But that's the power of the United States. So perhaps the power of the United States is in danger because that is big tech. So, but it's clear MAGA will be, surviving in the United States because there is no clear policy to resolve the anxiety, mistrust. If I were a president, I would say, let's redistribute to you guys, please donate to the government for the sake of MAGA, not to me, to be honest about that. So that means this will continue. Then diversification investment should be happening. So for Japan, definitely we want to increase the membership of CPTPP. And it's a great idea to work with the Europe, EU, who is now being approached by China, who is approaching China. But I think we have to create a free trade, reshape, working with the Europe and the Global South. So as for CPTPP, perhaps we should increase the membership from ASEAN, Indonesia, Thailand, and so forth, and definitely South Korea. Second, RCEP. I think it's a pity that India didn't join, but I understand the reason because of the flooding products from China, and it will be happening more and more. So to bring India to RCEP means a lot in terms of free trade. But what is missing is definitely dispute correction, dispute panel, dispute mechanism. And the current WTO cannot resolve the disputes. So RCEP should have such a panel mechanism to work on disputes because one-sided doesn't keep the free trade. It's not a matter of the US, it's a matter of perhaps China mostly. So how we can make effort tenaciously to bring India to free trade, I think that's so important. And Japan should take a leadership role for that, together with the CPTPP. And third, geopolitics mainly. I think free trade needs stability. Do you think we have stability in Asia? Not really. And there is a vacuum created by the United States in Asia, especially ASEAN. It's great that our Prime Minister went to ASEAN to see the leaders. But I think we have to think about what to do based on Quad. Not only the geopolitics to raise the deterrence capabilities, but also geoeconomy, which means like energy, like semiconductors. We need to reshape, reform the supply chain of semiconductors. We are working on, in this country, producing high-end, low-end semiconductors. I understand India is now making effort to start with the 16 nano. We are now producing 2 nano in Hokkaido. It's a big trial, but I think production must be okay, but the economics is still in question, but we will get there. But we should work together, for example, semiconductor, amongst the Quad, for example. So geoeconomics, geopolitics, in terms of geopolitics, I should mention, Japan decided to raise the budget of self-defense from 1% against the GDP to 2%. 2%, 3%, it doesn't mean anything. Contents are so important. We don't need any more the tanks. We need technology, working together, Quad. And we may work with the AUKUS, not only Pillar 2. I wish Japan could work with the AUKUS Pillar 1. I think we need to change the constitution. We need a big support from Maeda-san to do it. But definitely, it's a great moment that we declared to join even Pillar 2. I think that means a lot. Mm-hmm. And so foundation of stability for free trade is so important. So deterrence capabilities. That's why we can work with China. Stability. Mm. So China should not be set aside from our business or trade. But we need deterrence capabilities working together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Niinami-san. Trade through strength. And I think that's the point you're making, that if we get our politics right, we can trade on a more even basis. And I think that's an important point, as well as the importance of building a regional institution for trade dispute mechanisms, since the WTO is dysfunctional. And of course, the vacuum of America's retreat or reluctance to engage in the same manner at this particular moment. We will now turn to Shruti Pandalai as the first respondent from the IDSA in India. Shruti.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a wonderful opportunity to be back in Tokyo. I want to thank Dr. Samir, Saran, and the co-organizers for this opportunity. I'm not an economist, but a defense researcher. So I think I'll use my time on some of the observations to what this fantastic sort of panel has been speaking about this morning, to segue into a conversation on building resilience in the defense supply chain ecosystem, which is an agenda point not just for Tokyo and New Delhi, but also amongst the core capitals. I think what I took away from the conversation a short while ago was, the idea of doubling down on strategic trust. And if people across this room were talking about managing China a few years ago, we're also now talking about managing the United States together. I think, personally, if I think back to the last couple of weeks as to what we've seen happen in Delhi, India's recent sort of operational success against Pakistan proved that India's defense capabilities, forged through hard sort of earned lessons, are now real, reliable, and homegrown, delivering under pressure, and some would even argue, exceeding expectations. It has also generated a discussion on India's aspirations to become a critical node in the global defense supply chain. Beyond the headline of sort of make in India to make for the world and the rhetoric around it, I think it is important to understand that we are trying to focus just beyond the export numbers. We are talking about trust, capability, and strategic integration, which is, I think, instrumental to the conversation that's going to happen in the room today. To succeed, India has identified that we need to seek partnerships on 4 fronts. We're looking at deep industrial integration with strategic partners, scaling our MSMEs, forging high trust public-private ecosystems, and mobilizing a highly skilled, specialized industrial workforce at scale to deliver in the long term. I think the inaugural panel yesterday spoke to a lot of these issues when the Foreign Secretary talked about trust being a scarce commodity in the new era of alignment. And I think that's why it's important to sort of talk about the under-leveraged but high-potential corridor, especially in the defense landscape between Tokyo and New Delhi. I think the last couple of weeks, we've had a great dialogue on defense in New Delhi. And it's talking about a shift in a future-oriented defense partnership. We've had a few standout examples. The Unicorn Mass, for example, a co-development agreement involving BEL and the Japanese firms, marks India's access to a highly classified sensor technologies, a first for Japan and India. We're talking about, I think India has been fairly candid about our shortcomings on developing aero engine technologies. So as Japan engages with GCAP and India pushes AMCA, Tejas Mach 2 programs forward, there is a clear synergy in next generation airframes and, more critically, aero engines. We should also talk about what we've been discussing on naval synergy. Even though Japan opted out of India's P-75 project on submarines, Japan's experience with stealthy Soryo-class submarines and the MRO capacities and capabilities that India is not talking about under the idea of Mahasagar, which is an extension of our security and growth for all doctrine in the Indo-Pacific, perfectly aligns with sort of India's shipbuilding ambitions. I remember the Raisina dialogue earlier this year. There was a collective gasp in the room when experts from the shipbuilding industry talked about China's dominance and the absence of the West. And I think that therefore, while we talk about strategic trust and partnerships, I think there needs to be an acknowledgement that there has been a missing link, that the industrial collaboration remains shallow, and we need to move from sort of dialogue to deals, from sharing vision to actually collaborating in terms of intellectual property. And for this, we need to sort of also ensure that this is a call to action, really, from India's point of view, that our micro, small, and medium enterprises, the MSMEs, are embedded in these bilateral programs from day one. Because if you look at what the scale in India is going through, the MSMEs have actually become the bedrock of India's defense supply chains. And so we know that, with Boeing alone has over 300 suppliers, so there are examples there of how this can be replicated. Because if we want scalable, resilient supply base, MSMEs must be treated as not just peripheral vendors, but strategic co-developers. We can talk about the public-private ecosystem going forward, but I'll leave this conversation with one point. It was very interesting for me to be in Perth, Australia last year, which is considered to be the home base for the AUKUS program. And I heard a fascinating sort of conversation on how Australia is thinking about mobilizing a highly skilled, specialized industrial workforce to scale to deliver in the long term. The Australian Submarine Agency, state governments, university, and industry coming together to capacity to coordinate and move at pace. I think there are lessons when Samir talks about self-reflection on skilling of India's workforce and some of the conversations that we'll have going forward. So there is a narrow window here where our ambition, partnerships, and geopolitics align, and I hope the conversations today take that forward.
Thank you, Shruti. I think in many ways extending Niinami-san's argument that political partnerships as important if you have to create the undergirding for economic resilience as well as growth in the future. And that's something to think about. Ken, let me turn to you. Everyone has mentioned the United States of America.
Apparently.
Managing the US now is the main purpose of this world and conferences around the world. Tell us, Ken, how do we manage you?
Yep. Well, look, first, I'm delighted to be here and with some old friends on this panel as well. Delighted to comment. Look, first, I think it's fundamentally wrong to think of managing the United States in the same context as managing China. To begin with, because the United States is not a strategic threat to its allies and partners. Donald Trump worldview essentially, and he's an instinctive politician. He is, he would not claim to be a grand strategist. His instinctive view is very much as Prime Minister Abbott suggested, that the benevolence of the United States in creating the post-world order, that was a unique moment in history, and we've created this order, and we have borne too much of the burden for it, whether it be in terms of collective security here in the Indo-Pacific, and delighted that our Japanese partners, our allies, are stepping up in a very significant way. And I was just at the SEI the last couple of days, and it's impressive to see the number of Japanese technological startups, the partnerships with the United States, with other allies as well. And the Germans, and I think we're now going to see a new German government under Friedrich Merz that's gotten the message that it needs to step up, that it needs to massively increase its defense spending. They've talked now about this 5% number that Trump's been asking about for the Hague NATO summit, and the Germans seem to be moving in that direction, 3.5% for equipment, 1.5% personnel, infrastructure, and the like. So, and the point is, as Shruti said, to move from dialogue to action in this way, and I think that's what Trump wants. I mean, Liberation Day, I think many people were stunned by the breadth, the speed, the scope of both of the proposed reciprocal tariffs, and this was really a reaction to just a pent-up anger in the United States, largely at the World Trade Organization, a sense that China, obviously with the state-owned enterprises, has been gaming the system, exporting its excess capacity and subsidizing it and the like. And so, but what I think the administration had hoped for originally were offers to come immediately to the table. So the president made the announcement of the and immediately sent a signal, we want to negotiate. And there were very few. People were so stunned by the size of the reciprocal tariffs that they didn't know how to negotiate, and people were sort of lost. And here, I think the Japanese to this day are still kind of lost as to what to offer. And I think there you need to kind of enter into the president's mindset and think about what really matters to him. And so obviously removing as many of the non-tariff barriers, many of which date from for cultural reasons, just sitting down, coming up with a game plan for as many non-tariff barriers removed, how to reduce tariffs in the critical sector, to remove as much of these trade imbalances as possible, and then to sort of step up and invest where you can in the United States. Japan has done a great job. The Prime Minister has promised $1 trillion in foreign direct investment. But we also need massive help in training our workers. It's an area that we really have failed, and then Japanese corporations do a great job in this way, where in our system, blue-collar workers, once they lose their jobs, sort of drop out of the system and have a hard time picking up skills, whereas the Japanese factories in places like Indiana, Kentucky do an excellent job of training workers to have the kind of high skills and retraining them when the technologies change. And so and there are numerous ways that we really do need to work together to meet the China challenge. The president's obsessed about winning the AI challenge. I was in Taiwan about 10 days ago, and there are clear ways that the Taiwanese, who are also in this, I guess President Lai apparently couldn't sleep for 4 nights after Taiwan was, after Liberation Day. But Taiwan has huge cards in terms of its ability to work with the United States in terms of cutting-edge chips, training our workers, and helping us work together on the AI challenge. On energy, likewise, the president is very fixated on this Alaska natural gas pipeline that has the potential to have LNG from the almost a century's worth of LNG to flow to Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, under sort of American naval protection, much quicker than it takes to go the other route, which is far longer through the Straits of Malacca and through the Middle East, and with all the potential disruptions that occur there. It's got the potential to, the Japanese, the South Koreans in particular, have the potential to build an LNG infrastructure for Southeast Asia that would make Southeast Asia dependent economically on the United States, the way that it has been economically dependent on China, one could argue. So I think there are all sorts of things we can work together. Japan has been doing extraordinary work in next generation nuclear. We can work together to work on modular reactors to power the region so that people can avoid sort of relying on Chinese data centers, Chinese solar panels that, as we learned last week, have all sorts of transmission devices, shutdown systems. So I think rather than panicking and rather than thinking, oh my God, how am I going to respond? And the United States is as much of a headache as China is, just to sit down. The president wants deals. They carved out a deal with the UK. They're on the verge at one point of carving out a deal with India, which obviously has higher tariffs. So it's easier to carve out a deal with India relatively. And obviously India is critical in so many ways to the United States. It's the software talent, the potential for manufacturing if infrastructure is improved and the like, the huge cultural affinity between the two countries, a large number of Indians in the diaspora who lead our tech companies and the like. So there's a lot that can be achieved. The key is just not to panic, to sit down, realistically assess things. And I think that much can be achieved in the defense sector as well, the shipbuilding sector. The Secretary of the Navy was here a few weeks ago, talked about that. I know the Japanese government's open to collaboration with the United States and Europe on ideas from building non-Chinese bill of goods, cargo carriers that can be dual-hatted potentially as for both civilian and military purposes if need be. So there are all sorts of ideas out there. The important thing is not to panic, and to sit down and come up with them. And I think the administration will be very open to these things as long as you understand that the fundamental imbalances in the post-war system need to be corrected.
Thank you, Ken. I think that is reassuring. And in some sense, you are right. The only twist in the tale is that those you seemingly want to target may do the deal faster and better than those who you want to keep on your side. And I think that's the problem when doing a trade deal becomes the basis of international relations trade.
Just one point, the China deal, the real secret behind the China deal is the question of fentanyl and whether China is really going to cut back on the amount of the products that go into fentanyl, the precursors that it is sending to the United States. Many of us believe it is part of a revenge for the opium wars. And the Trump administration thinks that they have made real headway here in Geneva. Okay. We shall see.
Let me now turn to Vice President Wu from Hyundai Motor Group. South Korea has been mentioned a few times already this morning. So your perspective would be very useful, President.
Thank you, Samir. Thank you, ORF, JBIC, and Keizai Doyukai for having me here today. And Hyundai Motor Group has built a relationship with the ORF this year's Raisina dialogue. As South Korea and also Hyundai Motor Group has invested heavily in India. We have currently 2 plants, Chennai in Tamil Nadu and Anantapur in Andhra Pradesh. And we are going to operate 1 more plant in Pune, Maharashtra. All in all, maybe with the completion of our new plant in Pune, we might have the capacity of production 1.2 million cars in India. And Hyundai Motor Group also did an IPO October last year. That's our effort to be a part of India. We are not just treating India as a market or manufacturing plant. So with all the comments by our speakers today, it's going to help us to continue to have a partnership with India and also had a strong resilience in supply chain. And we also have former Prime Minister Abbott. During Prime Minister Abbott's tenure, Korea and Australia had a free trade agreement, which has been beneficial for 2 countries until now. And with that, I would like to mention that what's the worst thing for the corporate, I think that the Niinami-san and the Maeda-san knows much better than I do, but it's the uncertainties. We have experienced the huge shock wave during the COVID that disrupts the whole supply chains. And government policies are the tool to stabilize that shock wave in that period. So for corporate's point of view, the stabilizing the external shock is very much important and we expect the government to provide those policies. So now we are talking about the shock triggered by the US trade and tariff policies. On one part, we can understand it's the US domestic politics. That's how President Trump come up with the measures to tell his voters. But the measures and countermeasures that will add up more instability and more uncertainty in the market, that's make corporates very difficult to adapt to a new environment. I mentioned that Hyundai Motor Group has invested in India with 2 plants already and 1 more plant and 1 R&D center. It's mainly because possible that it's not only the market condition, but also the government policies that provide incentives and stability for us to continue to invest in those countries. So I think it is very important for us to have those kinds of policies from the government. We understand that depending on the domestic political situation, government might change the policy. But if you believe that one country cannot produce everything, the trade is inevitable, and how much you can rely on and you can trust on your foreign partners, the stable government policy is very important. We talked yesterday that the now just in time is gone. It's more of a just in case. It's balance between efficiency versus resiliency. In corporate point of view, that is very delicate balance. We want to have resiliency, but if we emphasize too much on resiliency, we lose efficiency. And believe me, I worked in the think tank, government, and now in corporate. Every penny is really important in corporate life, you know. So the delicate balance between efficiency and resiliency, and it's very much affected by the government policies. So I think that's one part that every government should consider. And we also talk about a lot of like economic security issues yesterday and today. And one of the issues that we talked about is the weaponization of the resources and technology. And I would like to tell you the one episode as I joined this corporate life. I was the part of the World Economic Forum's like autonomous driving sector. So we have people from the industries related to autonomous driving. And like every meeting, we have like 50 or 60 like tech from the technology industries. But there are one entity missing in that conference. No Chinese firms attending the meeting. So I asked why Chinese firms are not invited. And they told me that Chinese firms were not invited, but they just don't come because they are so advanced, so they don't have to come to the conference. So now we have to know that how to respond to this kind of external shock, including the weaponization of the resources and technology collectively. But at the same time, we also have to discuss how to respond to be more inclusive of those technologies so one country cannot dominate. Let me stop here, and I look forward to more discussion.
No, thank you. Thank you for your very important comments. Gautam Saxena, can I turn to you?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Saran, for having me, and great to be here, second year in a row for Raisina Tokyo. I'll try and weave in the capital provider financing investment aspect of the invigorating discussions we've had this morning, with the caveat that these are my personal views and not the views of ING. I'll cover 2 points. One is what I call the circling of the wagons around capital providers, and the second is around energy capital flows. When I say circling the wagons, I think we've started to see a bit of a hunkering down, an outcome of all the discussions we've had this morning, where folks are a lot more focused on country and continent-specific economic security. And Samir, perhaps it's time to build that independent resilience, and region-specific resilience. The risks to access to capital, supply chain, security, free trade, and long-term capital deployment are real, and particularly long-term deployment in key areas, for example, data centers, energy security, which need commitments and a long-term stable view on returns. I think driving the requirement for providing energy and data, democratic access to data, and also security for energy and data access. Serious long-term capital providers do not like volatility, right? And we've experienced extreme volatility in a very short period, the likes of which we haven't seen before. The only folks who like this are the hedge funds and the traders, and they are dealing with their own volatility because now suddenly it's all quiet and they don't know what to do this quarter. Yeah. I think we're also at a unique time when key bellwethers, US Treasuries, for example, as Niinami-san mentioned, are at risk of instability, right? And what do capital providers look at when the bellwethers are at risk themselves? I think for now, we should assume that capital is largely on the sidelines. and now starting to take sides based on country and continental economic security concerns, and sometimes missives. It's definitely time for stewardship. The second point is around energy capital flows. We will be doing a deeper dive later this afternoon on that topic. But I think U-turns on climate, and such sharp U-turns are not what we need today. There is significant capital available, but still awaiting on the sidelines. I think we are missing urgency, intensity, and accountability for a very key area which we need to all come together on. Renewables and energy, new energy portfolios of global majors, which was a big push globally, are now at risk. They are rudderless, lacking capital, lacking support, and unfortunately available at we could call deep value or distress situations. I think the key area for energy, again, we would love to see how that goes later today, but I think just to summarize the way all these geopolitical movements and seismic shifts impact capital providers is not to be underestimated, particularly when we are at a stage where we need to put long-term capital deployment to work, which definitely requires stability on the political side, the regulatory side, and on the returns aspect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We can take a few comments from all of you here. So you can just raise your hands, use the mic in front of you, and come in. Just brief introduction and a short comment, question. Although we don't have too much time for Q&A, but certainly pose the idea that all of us can benefit from. Does anyone want to come in? Do I see? Please go ahead.
Thanks, Samir. And
a quick introduction.
Yes. Thank you first to the organizers for having me. My name is Wong Kim Yin. I'm from Sembcorp, Singapore, energy company based in Singapore. We invested heavily in India. I thought just a quick comment and perhaps to provoke some thoughts. This trade war, maybe there is some good things that can come out of it. Now, just to set the context, 40 years ago in 1985, the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, then Prime Minister of Singapore, he was addressing the joint houses in the US. And he made a comment about trade. If I may just give me 1 minute to quote him. He said, for 40 years, the maintenance of political boundaries was made possible because people have been able to better their lot through trade. If this method for adjustment and accommodation between societies moving at different speeds is no longer possible, then a return to the traditional ways of conquest and influence is likely. So, to some extent, if the US is feeling that these trade relations are not to their interests and is not serving their interests, then having almost a reset in a way that President Trump is trying to do may actually offer the opportunities for the adjustment in lieu of a more aggressive way to exert influence. So I thought that's the thought that I want to
The silver linings, okay. Fair enough. Does someone else want to comment? Yeah, please go ahead. Satu.
Good morning. Thank you to the panel. Just a question. I heard, maybe I misheard, but I heard one tension. The tension surrounds the U.S., the indispensability of the U.S., but also uncertainty about the U.S. And I heard two alternative. One was, I think, Maeda-san, you mentioned the utility of U.S. pressures potentially on changing domestic forms. And from Niinami-san, I heard alternatives, CPTP, docking on other ASEAN and ROK, getting India more involved in the free trade game, et cetera. I'd like to hear more about the balance. If the US is indispensable, as I certainly think it is, then do you want alternatives, or is it more important to make some of the adjustments internally that Ken was, I think, referring to? What's the balance?
And does it have to be either or can it be both? So I think that's also, can we do both? Last intervention from any one of you who wants to come in, then I'll come back to Maeda-san, and I'll also bring Ken in. Ken, I want you to come in, and Prime Minister Abbott, I want you to reflect on what you've heard as well. Anyone else wants to come in? On the defense piece, on supply chains, on shipping. By the way, shipping, interesting note, I heard a few months ago at one of the conferences I was attending that the largest economy in the world has less than 500 boats that can carry large haul over long distances. I think double digits was the figure, 90 or 100 or something is the American fleet strength. And India is not doing too much better. But basically, free and open Indo-Pacific rides on authoritarian ships. That is the reality. Okay, so Ken, let me turn to you, and then I'll turn to the three initial speakers. Ken, why don't you come in?
Yeah, boy. Look, on this particular point, look, I do think, and Henry Kissinger said it about Trump first on your point. He talked about Trump being sort of the kind of figure that arrives, that heralds the end of the pretensions of one era and opens the door to a new one. And I think Trump has done that with globalization, has done that with China and the like, certainly. But at the same time, he has taken an attitude, as you saw through the Middle East trip, where the rhetoric between Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0. Trump 1.0 started out in the Middle East with the United States backing the blockade on Qatar that the Saudis have put in place, and Trump 2.0, saw a very positive visit to Qatar, I guess, not Qatar. So it's properly stated. So I think there is, I think that's the Trump 2.0 is definitely lacking the hard edge of Trump 1.0, which was the fire and fury, Pyongyang, the sort of escalate to de-escalate. I mean, paradoxically, on the trade side has been where the escalation has been, not on the foreign policy side. And I think some of the domestic criticism of Trump on Russia has been that he hasn't escalated, that he's escalated the pressure on Ukraine. Instead, some of the domestic criticism of the president, for what it's worth. As for the indispensability of the United States, no, the president, I think he totally, and I'm speaking from an American perspective, he understands the indispensability of the United States. He does not want America to disengage from the world. He likes going to the Middle East and cutting deals. He likes speaking to world leaders, but he feels that the United States, that so much of the wealth that should have been flowing into the United States, has gone elsewhere. So much of the productive capacity has gone elsewhere. While we have been stuck with the burden for global security. And I think, so I think that's how he understands things. But he does, as I said before, he doesn't think in a strategic sense. He thinks, that the United States has we are the indispensable nation for him, but it's not, he doesn't frame it in that way. And he sees it in his dealings with leaders around the world. And I do think he does want to sort of promote, certainly domestic reforms as need be to deal with some of these broader systemic changes that he wants to bring about.
Okay, Ken, I'll have to interrupt.
Sorry.
Prime Minister Abbott.
Well, Ken, look, thank you, and thanks everyone. It's been a very interesting discussion, obviously. I just want to reflect on two things. Three things, really. Yes, I think given what America's thinking and doing, I think it is very important for other countries to step up, and this is where countries like Japan and India are absolutely critical. Japan, economic powerhouse, India, the world's second democratic superpower, so enormous responsibilities that they really should start to shoulder. Second, I do think I reckon America feels that it's been in an abusive relationship with the rest of the world, that the rest of the world has been abusing and taking advantage of America. I don't think that's entirely fair, although there is no doubt that we've been free riding on defence, no doubt about that. But I guess the question is, does America want a divorce from the rest of the world, or does it just want a troll separation? Because it will be a very different world if America really does want to hold everyone else at arm's length, and it really is just all about America. Final point I want to make, and this is, I suppose, in response to Gautam, you don't want climate U-turns. If climate policy is impoverishing countries, and I think there's no doubt that much of Europe, the United Kingdom and Australia is being economically impoverished by current climate policy, shouldn't it change? Shouldn't it change? I mean, one of the most sensible things to come out of the current administration was the new energy secretary who said, A, there's no climate crisis, and B, there's no energy transition. Now, I happen to think that that is fundamentally correct, but that means that many countries, Western Europe and Australia in particular, have been on the wrong path for the last decade or so.
Very quickly, my impression of President Trump is he's a great showman, and also that transactionist. He's not ideologist. So that there's some opportunity for him to make some adjustments. One example is that Alaska LNG can raised. I'm a master of LNG because JBIC financed 40% of total world energy trade. Because Japan represents 40%, we finance 100% of this 40%. So Alaska LNG, by the way, that this is a very strategic project. On the day one of President Trump sworn in that he signed that executive order to unleash the potential of Alaska LNG, but it's not so likely to deliver so quickly because of construction of pipeline was 800 miles. My experience in Sakhalin to the construction of 450 miles pipeline, it took 7 years. So that it's not possible to deploy within his term. So that we can make some of alternative idea to do it. And also that, secondly, that the many countries like the Vietnam, for example, they do not have a LNG terminal, receiving terminal. So that if they want, it is not possible to import LNG from US so quickly. So that we can support Vietnam, for example, to make construction of LNG terminal. That's one point. So that we can many chance to cooperate, and Mr. Trump can understand and understand for adjustability of this reality.
Thank you, Maeda-san. And Niinami-san, you have the final word.
Yes. Uncertainty is a leverage for us to promote the CPTPP and RCEP. As a matter of fact, the intertwinedness of the world is the fact, real fact. So we need the US. US is still the center of innovation, definitely. For example, Rapidus, we have produced in 2 nano semiconductor. That's the working together with the United States. So US is needed, but we have to have the counterbalance, thinking about uncertainty. But the key thing is the big question, realities will win or not in the United States. I believe realities will win eventually, but when? But before the midterm election. So the end game will not be too far away. Believing that, but the uncertainty exists. That's why I'm talking about that.
So I think we've had a wonderful conversation as an opener for this day. A little bit of everything, enough to take into the specific panels we have later today. Please join me in applauding the wonderful panelists this morning for their contributions.